My daughter walked in with a deed and said, "Sign here, Mom." I smiled, because by then I already owned the pen. I was peeling apples at the kitchen sink when my daughter pulled into the gravel drive and came up the porch with a navy blue folder tucked under her arm like a promise I hadn't asked for. The knife slid against the red skin, and the peel fell in one long ribbon. Claire didn't knock. She never did anymore. She pushed open the screen door and called, "Mom?" like she owned everything her voice landed on. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and dish soap. The radio murmured morning weather and the coming cold. I wiped my hands on a towel and turned to meet whatever she had decided for me this time. "Hey," she said, breathless from the steps and the late October wind. She kissed my cheek without looking, dropped the folder on the table, and went straight for the stove as if coffee were a right rather than a courtesy. "I only have 10 minutes. Mason's in the truck with the kids. They want to see the barn after we're done, if that's okay." I looked out the window. The pickup idled next to the old maple. My grandchildren, Emma and Caleb, pressed their faces to the glass like puppies. Mason kept his eyes forward, hands tight at 10 and 2. The cider mill's banner hung crooked on the fence from last weekend's school fundraiser, half the letters flapping whenever the wind bothered to remind them. I turned off the radio. I hate sales pitches with background noise. "What's the folder?" I asked, though I already knew by the way she wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's nothing," she said. "Just some safety paperwork. Honestly, it'll take 2 minutes. I just need your signature on a couple of things so we can protect you, you know? You're alone out here, and at your age—" "Stop," I said. The word came out soft. I have learned a soft no is harder to fight. "Coffee first." She poured herself a mug and topped mine without asking. She had my hands, my mouth, my impatience. She did not have my permission. The folder stayed quiet on the table between us. She took a sip, set down the mug, and opened to a flagged page with a sticky note that said, "Sign here," in cheerful blue ink. The first sheet had big type that friendly lawyers like to use when they want you to think they're on your side. Durable power of attorney. That wasn't nothing. The second was a quitclaim deed. "I thought we talked about this," Claire said quickly when I didn't reach for the pen. "Mason and I worry. If something happens, if you fall or forget your medicine, this makes it easier. It lets us take care of things. We can help with the mortgage, the repairs, the bills. You won't have to struggle. It's just prudent. Everyone our age is doing this for their parents." "Everyone our age?" I said. "You know what I mean," she said, cheeks flushing pink. She was beautiful when she was flustered. She had been a spectacular liar at 8 and no better now. And anyway, it's temporary. We can always switch it back later. It's basically a formality. I turned the pages one by one and read while she fidgeted inside and checked the time. The words said exactly what words like that always say. "Hand us the keys, and we'll swear we're only going to use them when we need them." I set the folder down and looked at her. There was mascara smudged beneath one eye. A hair from her ponytail had escaped and stuck to her lip gloss. I handed her a napkin. "You brought a deed," I said. "That's not a formality." "It's just in case," she said. "Mason talked to a guy. If we consolidate everything, we can refinance. It'll save you money. It will save us money. Everybody wins." "Mason talked to a guy," I repeated. "Please don't do that thing," she said. "The thing where you repeat what I say like I'm stupid. I'm not stupid. I'm trying to help you. Winter is coming. The roof still leaks in the mudroom. You said the tractor was coughing smoke. Do you think you should be running a farm by yourself?" "Claire," I said, "I've been running this farm by myself for 6 years. At 68, alone in the country, miles from a hospital," she shot back. "Do you know how that sounds? It sounds reckless." "I know how it sounds," I said. "It sounds like my life." She started to cry then, not big sobs, but the small, pretty tears of a woman who learned long ago that crying is often faster than arguing. She put her hand on the folder and did not look up. "We're scared," she said. "We can't afford to be scared all the time. Just sign the papers, okay?" I did not remind her that fear is often an excuse people use when the truth is they want control. I did not tell her that I had slept with a radio beside my bed the first year after her father died, not because I was scared, but because silence and grief can sound so much alike. I did not say any of the words that rose up in me like bees. I rinsed my coffee cup. I took her hand off the folder and put it back into her lap. I kissed the top of her head and smelled the cheap floral shampoo she had always loved and could always afford. "I won't be signing today," I said. Her head snapped up. "Why not?" "Because I'm not ready to hand over my life. Because signing things is not what people do when they're scared. Because you didn't come to talk. You came to tell. So you want to make this hard," she said, blinking away whatever softness she had each time she needed it. She snapped the folder shut. "Fine, be stubborn. But don't call me when the pipes burst at 2 a.m, okay?" "You say that like you would pick up," I said. She stood so quickly her chair scraped the old pine, a sound that makes my jaw ache. "The kids want to see the barn," she said. "Can they at least see the barn?" "Of course," I said. "It's their grandfather's barn. It will always be their barn." She hesitated. She had not expected that answer to be kind. Then she softened. "Because she's not a villain, she's just my daughter." She went to the door and called them in. I heard Emma's sneakers on the porch, Caleb's laugh, Mason's careful voice warning them not to run with whatever they were carrying. They barged into the kitchen full of wind and excuses and questions. "Grandma, are we really going to live here this winter?" Emma asked before her mother could shut her up with a look. I kept my face still. "Is that what you were told?" Emma glanced at her mother and then at the folder. "She is 11 and that is an age of noticing everything." "Dad said our bedrooms would be upstairs because that's where the heat rises," she said. "He said you'd be so happy to have us here." "Your father says many things," I said lightly. "Do you want to go see if the cats had their kittens in the hayloft?" They ran out before permission finished leaving my mouth. Mason stepped in and stood near the threshold like a polite stranger. He had shaved too close and the skin on his neck was raw. He smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "Morning, Margaret," he said. "Before you decide anything, I hope you'll consider that we're trying to protect this place. You're always saying it's your legacy. If you put it in our name now, we can avoid probate. It's efficient." "That's the second time today someone has told me what I always say," I said. "Funny, I don't recall saying either of those things." He colored. "We have an appointment with a notary at 1, he said, "if you change your mind." "I don't expect I will," I said. He shifted his weight and studied the count of screw holes in the doorframe because he didn't trust himself to meet my eyes. "I guess we'll see you at Thanksgiving," he said, "if we're not already here." I watched them cross the yard together like a small army. My daughter with her folder, my son-in-law with his timing, my grandchildren with their bright hope that adults mean what they say. They went to the barn, and for a few minutes I heard laughter and the creak of the ladder and the scrape of small feet on old wood. The wind picked up. The flag on the mailbox snapped. The turkeys at the edge of the pasture lifted their heads like nosy old ladies. Then the truck door slammed, and they were gone. I did not start shaking until the sound of the engine was a smear on the road. Rage is a chemical you must not let ruin your own blood. I rinsed the knife. I put the apples in the pie plate with sugar and flour and a pinch of nutmeg because it is a day for small comfort. I called Helen. "Tell me you finally had enough," she said instead of hello. "I finally had enough," I said. "Can I come over?" "Now," she said. "Bring that pie you pretend is for me." I drove to Brattleboro in my green truck with the left mirror that shakes when you go over 50 and the heater that only works if you hit the dash just so. The sky had that hard blue that means cold is sharpening its knives somewhere you can't see yet. Helen Parker lived in a yellow house with a white porch and a mailbox that leaned like a drunk but never fell. She put the kettle on and handed me a legal pad and told me to talk until I ran out of words. I did. I told her about the folder and the notary and the way Claire had kept her hand on the deed, like it was a baby kitten that might run away if she loosened her grip. I told her about Mason's calculation and the way he said probate like he had learned a new word that made him feel taller. I told her about the roof and the tractor and the pipes and the winter and the quiet that comes at 3 a.m. when you remember how loved you were and how long ago that was. Helen waited until I stopped and then said the thing I knew she would. "We should have done this a year ago," she said, "but you weren't ready. Are you ready now? I'm ready, I said. I'm tired of being treated like a soft place to land. I'm tired of having my concern mistaken for weakness. I'm tired of being told what at my age means by people who have not yet bled in the ways I have bled. Good, she said, eyes bright in a face mapped by kindness and eye rolls. Because this is just paperwork in the end. The difference is who holds the pen. Helen had been a probate and real estate attorney for 40 years and then retired, which means she only did work for friends and in cases that let her sleep at night. She made a list. She used small letters to keep from scaring me. First, she said, we were going to form an LLC, not because I needed to be fancy, but because it put a layer of legal clothing around the farm that nobody could strip off with a sob story. Hall Ridge Farm, LLC. The name felt both ridiculous and true. Second, we were going to transfer the deed from me to that LLC, with me as the sole member and manager. Third, we were going to file a notice with the town. Fourth, we were going to draw up a lease. For who? I asked, though I knew. For whomever you decide gets to sleep under your roof, she said. If what they want is to live there, then they can do so like any other tenant, with respect, on your terms. My daughter is not going to sign a lease to live in her childhood home, I said. She will if she wants it badly enough, Helen said. And if she won't, she doesn't get to live there at all. I thought of Emma's eyes when she had asked about bedrooms and heat rising. The ache went through me like a thin blade. This is not revenge, I said to prove it to myself. This is protection. It's both, Helen said, and that's okay. We drove to the bank that afternoon, the one I'd used since before the teller behind the counter had been born. Mrs. O'Rourke had a pin that said she had been there 32 years. She wore red lipstick only at Christmas, and she loved me for no good reason beyond the fact that I was always kind and never impatient. "What are we doing, Margaret?" she asked, and I saw her face change when I told her. "About time," she said. She notarized documents and slid forms across the desk and looked me dead in the eye when I wrote out the checks for the filings. "You know this means you're the boss," she said. "I know," I said. "I have always been." By bedtime, I had signed papers with more stamps than a passport and a folder thicker than the one Claire had brought me that morning. I put it in the gun safe because I do not own a gun, but I do respect locks. I made myself soup and poured wine and fell asleep upright with the television whispering the weather again. Same cold on its way, same warnings, same sky. The next day, I went about regular things as if I hadn't lifted an axe and split something in myself cleanly. I fed the barn cats. I threw feed to the chickens and watched them run like old ladies late for church. I paid the feed bill at Whitcomb's and came away with a bag of saltwater taffy I didn't need because Joe always slides something sweet into my box. I refilled the propane. I walked the fence line and scared 2 deer who acted offended by my existence. I sat on the back step and drank a thermos cup of coffee while the afternoon made its slow decision to be evening. I counted my blessings like people tell you to do when they don't want to hear you complain. The list was longer than it had any right to be. I ended with my own name. 2 days later, Claire came back with Mason and the children and 3 boxes in the back of the truck. Not everything, just enough to make it look like moving in was already a fact. It is an old trick husbands and wives use on each other and on their parents and on landlords and on strangers. Start acting like something is real and dare anyone to say it's not. Claire came into the kitchen with a smile that didn't reach the places it should. "We found a couch on Facebook Marketplace," she said, as if this were a reason rather than a symptom. "Mason can carry it in if you'll just move those chairs." "Don't move the chairs," I said. She stared at me for a long time like she thought I might be joking. I did not blink. She shifted to the next tactic. "The kids are exhausted," she said. "It would be so much easier if they could just nap upstairs. Can we put their stuff in my old room?" "No," I said. "Mom," she said, warning in the word like a dog's growl. "Mason," I said, "would you mind waiting on the porch with the kids?" He started to say something. He always starts, but thought better of it. Emma and Caleb followed him out with the tray of cookies I had made because I cannot help myself. Claire stood with her arms around herself the way she does when she's freezing and furious at once. "I don't understand what you're doing," she said. I'm setting the terms, I said. You and Mason want to live here, then we do it legally and calmly and with the respect this house deserves and the respect I deserve. You'll sign a lease, you'll pay rent, you'll agree to rules. If you break them, you'll leave. No crying, no pretending the rules are mean. No more acting like love requires me to disappear. A lease, she said, as if I had suggested we all go to Mars. We're family. We are, I said, and families show each other their best, not their worst. Do you want the paperwork now, or should I email it? She laughed, and it sounded like a scream that had given up. You have a lease, she said flatly. I do, I said. I also have an LLC. I am the manager. The farm is not legally my personal asset anymore. It is a business. If you want to live in the farmhouse, you deal with the business. You put our home into a company, she said. I put my home into protection. It had only been mine for 6 years and a lifetime, and I was tired of waking up wondering who would try to take it next. You're insane, she said. No, I said. I'm tired. She went to the door and snapped her fingers in the direction of the truck. Kids, get back in, she called. Then she turned and put both hands on the table and leaned close the way she did when she was 3, and wanted to make sure I understood the seriousness of wanting a pony for Christmas. We can't afford rent, she said. This is about us needing a place to land and you needing help. The roof, the tractor, the pipes, remember? We'll be company. We'll do chores. We'll cook. We'll watch you. It will be good. I don't need to be watched, I said. And I won't hire you for chores you won't do. If what you need is a place to live, then you and I can be in business together. If you don't like that, don't live here. This is blackmail, she said. It's boundaries, I said. She held my stare for another few seconds, then straightened and rolled her shoulders like a boxer getting ready to go a few more rounds. Email the papers, she said. We'll look. I emailed the lease to the other side of the porch. I watched Mason's face change as he read on his phone. He came back in alone, a softer man than he had been last week. $2,000 a month, he said. Are you kidding me? That's lower than market, I said. Your lease includes utilities and the big pasture. It does not include the tractor, and it does not include the back barn, and the mudroom roof gets fixed before anyone moves in. I expect a security deposit and first month's rent. I expect noise after 9 to be human. I expect no strangers in my house without asking. I expect respect. He laughed. Respect? From you. I let him hear the silence long enough to know what he had said. He colored again, a man whose blood is close to the surface. Okay, he said, I was out of line. He looked at the paperwork again. His lips moved when he read. We can't do 2,000, he said finally. 1,500, and we can start in January. We need time to give notice. That's fine, I said, as long as your deposit clears now. You want us to pay you to maybe move into the house we grew up in, he said. That's not your house, I said. It's mine, and it's not even mine now. It belongs to Hall Ridge Farm, LLC. I'm just in charge. You think putting it in a company means we won't get it someday? He said, ugly now. You think Claire won't inherit? I don't wake up in the morning to arrange your inheritance, I said quietly. I wake up to be alive. That night, I lay awake and counted the small noises houses make when they settle. The pop of old wood, the sigh of vents, the scratch of something with a tail under the porch. I thought of my daughter at 12 in her blue room, writing a list of baby names in the back of a math notebook. I thought of her at 22, leaving home with a duffel bag and a boy who could not afford promises but made them anyway. I thought of her at 34 in a hospital bed, hair in her eyes, swearing she would never say to her children the things I had once said to her in anger. I thought of her yesterday with a folder and a plan and fear she mistook for love. The first check cleared on a Thursday. Mrs. O'Rourke called because she liked to be the one to say good news. The security deposit came pending, then complete. The next morning I stood in the kitchen and signed my name on a lease opposite my own daughter's signature, ink a little smeared where a tear had fallen. I made 2 copies and gave one to them and put one in the gun safe. It felt like a wedding and a funeral at once. We set a move-in date after Thanksgiving. The kids helped me take down the pumpkin display and put up a wreath that smelled like the forest after rain. Mason came over with a measuring tape and measured things any man measures when he is trying to feel like this will be okay. He measured doorways and sighed, and then stood very still in the pantry like he hoped no one would notice he had stopped trying not to cry. I pretended I had left something on the porch so he could wipe his face and curse the dust. Thanksgiving came with too much turkey and the neighbor's cranberries that taste like medicine, but we eat them so she won't be hurt. I let Claire bring the stuffing even though she puts too much sausage in it. I let Mason carve. I let the kids set the table, and I did not go behind them and straighten every last spoon. We said what we were grateful for, and I watched my daughter watch me when I said I was thankful for the chance to learn how to be a mother to a woman rather than a child. When they moved in, they moved as quickly and as noisily as people who have been living with tension long enough to think noise will drown it. The couch from Facebook Marketplace arrived smelling like someone else's house and tried to swallow up the living room. Mason put a big television on the wall, and Emma cried because that meant taking down the framed photos of her grandfather and the one of Claire at 6 holding a baby lamb. They promised they were just packing those photos away for a while. I pretended to believe them. The mudroom roof got fixed with money I took from the farm account, and a discount I got from a man whose mother I had taken soup to when she broke her hip. The upstairs bathroom got a new shower curtain with cartoon cactus on it because Emma had a phase. I moved into the little sugar house at the edge of the orchard and told everyone I had always wanted to live in a studio like a fancy woman in New York. I put a hot plate on a shelf and strung white lights along the rafters and hung a quilt over the door to keep the wind from coming in and being rude. It was both unbearable and perfect. The first month went okay. They kept the noise within reason. They did dishes sometimes. They kept the kitchen mostly clear of the towers of food wrappers I had imagined. Mason shoveled the front walk before I could get up and do it myself. Claire left me notes sometimes with a smiley face where she asked if I needed anything from town. I found my grandfather's wrench set in a place it had no business being and said nothing. I moved my good mixing bowls into the sugar house. You do what you must to live without starting wars. The second month stopped being okay. January sank claws into the yard. The wind came down out of Canada and forgot to say please. Emma started slamming doors because Emma is 11. She did not deserve the weight of this drama, but anger always picks children first because they don't know to defend themselves. Caleb had a friend over, and that friend brought 3 more, and my kitchen looked like a storm had run circles in it. The television fought the sound of the dishwasher. The dishwasher fought the sound of the arguments nobody said were arguments. The thermostat crept up a few degrees and stayed there because comfort was something my daughter could control when so much else had become a negotiation. I got the electric bill and sat down on the sugar house step and laughed until I cried and cried until I laughed. The first rent check of the new year did not show up on the 1st. It did not show up on the 3rd either. On the 5th, I went to the kitchen door and knocked and waited to be invited in, because that is what you do even when it is your own kitchen. Claire opened the door and smiled like a photo. "Hey," she said. "Want coffee?" "Rent is late," I said. She blinked. "We're tight this month," she said. "Christmas." "I know," I said. Christmas was expensive. The rules still exist. She crossed her arms as if she were cold. "Can't you give us until the 15th?" she asked. "You know we're good for it." I was not sure of that at all. "I can give you until the 10th, I said. "After that, the lease says late fees." "Late fees," she repeated, as if the words had a taste she didn't like. "Okay, fine." The 10th came and went. On the 12th, I slid an envelope under the kitchen door because I do not like scenes, and I do not like standing at my own table asking my daughter to love me enough to not treat me like a stranger. Inside the envelope was a letter gently reminding them of the rent and the late fee. I wrote it on Hall Ridge letterhead that Helen had insisted I order because paper is sometimes a weapon you can use without hurting anybody. On the 14th, Mason came out to the sugar house with a check that covered half the rent and none of the late fee and a face that looked like he had slept in the cab of his truck and woken up 30 years older. He handed me the check and stared at his shoes. "We'll make it up next month," he said. "I can't carry you," I said. "You're not carrying us," he snapped. "You're asking me to," I said. He shook his head and walked away. The next morning, my mailbox held an envelope from Helen with a printout of words I did not want to read. 3-day notice to pay rent or quit. I put it on the counter and made tea and looked at it like it might be a snake. I folded it back into the envelope and took it down the hill and handed it to Claire. She read it with her jaw clenched. She kept reading it after she had reached the bottom, as if the part she wanted would appear if she were thorough. She looked up. "I can't believe you're doing this to us," she said, "to your grandchildren." "I am doing this for me," I said softly. "The fact that it keeps you honest is a blessing I'm not going to apologize for." "You want us out," she said. "I want you respectful," I said. "If you can be respectful, I want you here. If you can't, then I want my peace back. Both can be true. Choose." She took a breath that sounded like a sob getting hung up in a rib. "You'd rather be alone than help your own daughter." "I would rather be free than be the first person you think of when you need a bill paid," I said. "I would rather be loved than used, and I would rather you learn how to stand up in your own life than teach you that you can fall into mine whenever you like." The check arrived on the 3rd day, late fee included. I put it in the bank and went back to my chores and tried not to let the relief seduce me into forgetting the math. A week later, Emma came to the sugar house after school and sat on the stool and watched me roll out pie crust without speaking. After a while, she announced, "Mom says you're being dramatic," in the careful voice of a child reporting a weather forecast she does not understand. "I am sometimes," I said, cutting butter into flour. "So is your mother." "She says you made it so we're your tenants so you can control us," Emma said. "I made it so I am not controlled," I said. "That is different." "How do you know the difference?" she asked, as if I were a math teacher standing at the board. "You feel the difference," I said. "Your stomach knows." "My stomach doesn't know," she muttered. "It will," I said. "Do you want to prick the crust before we bake it?" She did. She pricked it carefully, making a constellation of holes, leaving too much space in the middle. I did not fix it. The crust puffed unevenly in the oven, and we laughed and ate it anyway because imperfection is edible and sometimes good. When she left, she hugged me with one arm because that's what 11 does. On the porch, she turned and said, "Are we going to have to move?" the way children ask whether Santa knows their new address. "I hope not," I said, "but if you do, it won't be because I wanted that." 2 weeks later, the front door was locked when I came to water the African violet that has been in the kitchen since 1983. My key did not work. That's how I found out about the new locks. I stood on the porch a long time. The snow made a sound like styrofoam under my boots. I knocked. Mason opened the door with a mug in his hand and a face that said he had been expecting a fight and practiced for it. "Why is my key not working?" I asked. "Because it's not your house anymore," he said, and then flinched because he knew that was the wrong thing to say. "Because we were worried about break-ins," he corrected too fast. "We'll get you a new key." "You will get me a new key today," I said, "or you will get a sheriff at 10 a.m. He began a speech he'd been carrying around like a shield, about privacy and autonomy and the right to lock your own door. I let him finish because men do not hear themselves when you interrupt. When he ran out of words, I held up my hand. "A lease is not a marriage where we become one," I said. "A lease is an agreement where you live in my house and I still own the locks. I will have a key." He gave me a key that afternoon, and I had Helen bring a locksmith the next day to rekey everything and put it back on the master system we had always used. Mason was gone when the locksmith came. Claire stood by with a white face and a hand that trembled around a mug she didn't drink from. The locksmith was a woman with a braid so long it looked like a rope. She moved through the house as if she owned all the time she needed. When she was finished, she handed me a ring with 3 keys on it. "Anyone gives you trouble," she said, "you call Deputy Olson. She's on your side." I did not want to call the sheriff. I did not want to call anybody. I wanted this to cool down into a story we would laugh about someday when the children were grown and the farm was standing and nobody's paperwork was a weapon, but desire and reality have always been distant cousins. A week later, Mason decided he was landlord now. He sent me a text to inform me that per our agreement, the back barn would be used for his workshop. There was no such clause. When I said no, he wrote back 3 paragraphs about fairness. The next day, I found his fishing gear and a broken recliner in the back barn anyway. I took photographs because evidence is a language I respect. I called Deputy Olson because boundaries are not threats if you think of them as fences. She came out in a beige SUV with the seal on the side and boots that left honest prints in the snow. She walked through the house with me and down into the mudroom and out to the back barn. She noted the recliner and the line where cobwebs had dusted off when Mason had dragged something across a shelf I had wiped last week. She looked at the lease like she couldn't decide whether to be proud of me or disappointed in a world that makes mothers write leases for their daughters. "It's straightforward," she said. "He's in violation. If they won't comply, you can serve a notice. If they still won't, you can file in court." "Court," I said. "It sounds worse than it is," she said. "Judges like paper. You will have paper. Just don't call it eviction," she added gently. "Not yet. You're still trying to live together." I tried to live together. I tried like a saint tries to tolerate a neighbor with a leaf blower at 6 a.m. I tried like a woman who still remembers holding a feverish 9-year-old Claire in July, humming nonsense into her hair. I tried like a farmer whose crop depends on weather they cannot control. It did not matter. Mason grew more petulant as bills multiplied like mice. Claire grew sharper as guilt corroded her spine. Emma learned new ways to slam what did not deserve slamming. Caleb learned to be quiet because quiet costs less energy than being a child. I learned to sleep in 2-hour pieces and stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m. and recite to myself the names of all the trees on the South Ridge because naming things has always made them less likely to kill me. The second rent check of the spring did not arrive at all. I waited 3 days and sent the notice. On the 3rd day, they posted a picture on Instagram of the 4 of them at a Bruins game, faces split open with joy, hands throwing peace signs toward a jumbotron that did not notice them any more than God notices ants. I looked at the photo too long. I looked, and then I put the phone down and did what the paper said to do. Claire came to the sugar house that evening, red-eyed and shaking. She did not knock. She pushed open the door and stood in the light like a woman caught in a storm she had not bothered to check the weather for. "You filed at the courthouse," she said, voice shredded. "You filed against your own family." "I filed to keep my life," I said. She laughed, ugly and electric. "This is about money," she said. "You have always loved money more than love." I laughed too, the short, tired sound a body makes when it knows it cannot run any farther. "I have always loved survival," I said. "Every bill I paid when your father was sick was a blessing. Every penny I saved to keep this place was a little piece of peace I tucked into my pocket like a note to myself. You call it money, I call it dignity. Both can be true." "You're going to make us homeless," she said. "No," I said. "Your choices might." The hearing was on a Wednesday in March, when the dirty snow piles on the side of Main Street look like the end of the world and everyone is sick of wearing scarves. Helen came with me and wore her good brooch and a navy dress that made her look like a woman who could stop a tank. We sat on a hard bench with other people who looked like us and nothing like us, loiterers and lovers and landlords and all the people who have to drag their stories into rooms like this so someone else can decide what is fair. Claire and Mason sat on the other side of the aisle with a man they'd found on the internet who was younger than the shoes I was wearing. He smiled at me and then at the floor. Judge Ramirez was small and square and the kind of tired that makes a person kind. She read the lease. She read the notices. She asked questions in a voice like the slow side of a river. Claire cried. Mason tried to interrupt and got told no, and then tried again and got told no again, and then sat like a boy who had been sent to the corner and didn't know why. The judge asked me if I wanted to speak. I did not, but I did. "I love my daughter," I said, not looking at Claire because I would have wanted to hold her hand, and that isn't what this was. "I am not trying to punish her. I am trying to live. I put this house into an LLC because fear makes people do ugly things, and I did not want to hate anyone I loved. I asked for rent not because I need to count my money, but because counting is how people show they mean it. I don't want them out. I want them good. If they can't be good here, then they need to go be good someplace else." The judge nodded. She turned to Claire and Mason and asked them if they could pay. Their lawyer began a speech about medical bills and inflation and the price of heating oil. The judge let him talk as long as it took for him to realize she was not moved by words that did not answer the question. "Can you pay?" she asked. Claire looked at Mason and then at her lap and then at me and then at the judge. "No," she said. The order came in the mail in a quiet envelope with a seal pressed into the bottom like a thumbprint. Pay within 10 days or vacate within 30. I put it in the gun safe and took a long walk up the ridge and down the other side and sat on the stump where the cottonwoods start and cried some more because a body must keep its fluids moving or it will turn to stone. That night, Claire came alone to the sugar house. She brought a 6-pack of ginger ale and a bag of pretzels. She sat cross-legged on my floor like she was 14 again and asked me if she could dye her hair blue. "I don't know how we got here," she said, without the drama of the last few months, in the low, true voice she uses when she wants to confess. "We got here 1 inch at a time," I said. "You were scared and I was tired and we both thought the other one should fix it. I drew a line and you thought it was a wall." "I kept seeing myself at 8, she said, smiling in a way that hurt. "When you'd pull the car over on the way home from town and let me get out and run next to you on the shoulder because I had too much energy to sit. I thought you would always pull over for me." "I pulled over," I said. "I didn't put you in the driver's seat." She put her head in her hands and laughed and cried at once. "We can't pay you," she said. "We can barely pay ourselves." "I know," I said. "Then you need to move." "We don't have first and last month for anywhere decent," she said. "We were counting on—" She stopped because she is not stupid. She saw the sentence before it finished writing itself in the air. "We were counting on your house." "I can help," I said, and she looked up so fast her neck cracked. "I can loan you first and last with a written agreement that you will pay it back. No interest, no screaming, no pretending this is a gift. You will go to a financial counselor at the community center and meet twice a month for 6 months. You will not ask me for money during that time. You will bring the children here whenever you like. But you will not live in that house. You can take the couch if you want. I always hated it." She blinked hard like she had been slapped with mercy. "Okay," she said. "Okay." They moved out on a Saturday in April when the sky could not decide whether to rain or to be kind. The truck backed up to the porch and the neighbors pretended not to watch while watching from their windows, because that's what neighbors do when they are trying to be loyal to more than one person at a time. I baked cinnamon rolls because stress makes everyone hungry, and I am still a woman even when I am a landlord. Mason carried boxes and did not speak to me. Claire hugged me too long when the last load was in the truck. Emma refused to cry while crying. Caleb found the quarter I had hidden under the porch rail when he was 3, and I had told him there were always treasures for boys who looked carefully. He held it up like a medal. "I found it," he said. "I knew it would still be here." "It always will be," I said. "There are things even adults don't take." When they drove away, I went back into the kitchen and sat on the floor and leaned against the cabinet that has a dent in it from 1989 when a cast iron skillet slipped off the hook and found gravity. The house was quiet in the way a house is quiet when it has survived something. I went room by room and opened windows and let April in. I took the lease out of the safe and put it in a folder labeled completed. I thought about tearing it up and putting the pieces in the compost so the worms could eat our stubbornness and turn it into something good. But paper has uses even when it has finished doing harm. I put it on a shelf instead. Then I went out and stood in the yard and listened to a flock of geese gossip overhead and thought about how nobody teaches them to leave and nobody has to tell them when to come home. In June, I turned the farmhouse into a short-term rental for traveling nurses. I had 3 come through that summer, each one polite and tired and grateful for a quiet place with a backyard and a porch that faced the evening. They paid on time. They left thank you notes and flowers. One left me a jar of split pea soup that made me feel like somebody's mother in a safe way. I used their money to put a new metal roof on the barn and fix the sill that had been sinking toward the dirt like a tired man. I took the rest and bought the softest sheets I have ever slept on because luxury is sometimes a rebellion. Claire and Mason found an apartment in town near the school. 2 bedrooms up 3 flights of stairs with a view of a dumpster and a sliver of river if you leaned. They sent me a photo of the kids sitting on the floor eating Chinese food out of cartons on their first night. Emma looked like a person who had just learned something she didn't know she needed to know. Caleb looked like joy had adjusted to its new proportions. Claire started working weekends at the hardware store because they need the extra cash and because she likes being useful in ways that do not make her cry. Mason took a second shift and pretended the hours didn't make him feel old. They met with the counselor. They learned words like budget and emergency fund and grace. I learned that I could stop checking my phone after 9 p.m. and still wake up alive. In August, Emma came for a week and we organized my sewing room and folded fat quarters in colors that made the table look like a candy shop. She brought a notebook full of short stories she had written about a girl who could talk to trees. I told her that I had always suspected trees were chatty. She rolled her eyes and then smiled because she is still enough of a child to believe me. We put up a tent in the yard and slept with the flap open to the summer night and listened to the insects doing their endless work. In the morning, over pancakes, she asked, "Why did you make Mom sign that lease?" Not accusatory anymore, just curious, like a scientist picking up a new rock. "So she could stop seeing me as a soft place and start seeing me as a person," I said. "So she could stop asking me to be God." "That's a lot for a piece of paper," she said. "Paper does big things," I said. "So do boundaries." "What's a boundary?" she said, as if she hadn't been learning it in her body for months. "It's a fence you build to keep the cow from wandering off the cliff," I said. "If the cow doesn't like the fence, that doesn't make you mean." She considered this with great seriousness and then nodded because 11 can make sense of almost anything when it wants to. In September, Claire came alone with a bag of apples from the orchard near their place because hers weren't ready yet, and she has always liked being first. She stood at the counter while I cut the bruises out and the good pieces into slices, and we pretended we weren't thinking about last September. "I got a raise," she said finally. "You did?" I said. "Pleased the way you are when your child learns how to float." 10%, she said with a smile that reached the places it should. "I'm going to put half into savings like we promised the counselor, and we're only going to order pizza once a month." Caleb agreed because he likes the way I make sauce better anyway. "Your sauce is too sweet," I said. "That's because you make everything bitter," she said, and then we both laughed, and then she cried, and then I did too, and it was not the crunchy crying of winter. It was the good kind. "I'm sorry," she said when we had wiped our faces and agreed not to be dramatic about it. "I'm sorry for the folder and the pressure and the name-calling and the locks. I forgot you were a person." "I'm sorry for the weeping and the notices and the speech in court," I said. "I forgot you were scared." "Are you still my mother?" she asked, as if it had been in the lease somewhere and she'd missed it. "I am," I said, "even when I am your landlord." We laughed then because the word landed like a bird on the table between us, ridiculous and right. I poured cider. We made pie. We ate it hot enough to burn our tongues, and we didn't care. The late afternoon slid toward evening the way it does when you have made some peace with yourself. Sometimes people ask me if I miss the old days, the loud ones with a television flickering in the other room, and a man's boots by the door, and a daughter's door slamming, and a pot of chili that never ran out before it was time. I miss the idea of them more than the truth. The truth was loud in a way that made me small. These days are quiet in a way that lets me be big. I go to the farmer's market on Saturdays and bring home too much basil. I let Helen teach me how to play cribbage and pretend to win when she lets me. I volunteer one morning a week at the elementary school library because children handle books like they're being trusted with one of God's ribs. I walk the ridge and know the names of my trees and the stones that never move. I clean the chicken coop listening to the book club podcast my niece told me about, and holler back at the hosts when they misunderstand a character so badly that I take it personally. I text with Emma, who sends me photos of her drawings of women with roots for hair. In October, a year after the folder, the sky did that thing again where it cuts you and heals you at the same time. The maples lit the hillside like a gossip you don't want to be true but can't look away from. Claire came with the kids in sweaters and hemlines that did not obey my idea of weather. We pressed cider and stained our hands and laughed when the first glass tasted like the inside of a hive. Mason came later, quiet in a good way. He stood near the barn and looked up at the new roof and the way the sunlight moved along the seams. "Looks good," he said, grudging but sincere. "It does," I said. "The nurses paid for it." He nodded and kicked at a pebble with his boot. "I was a jerk," he said finally. "I'm trying not to be." "I know," I said. "Me too." We didn't hug. We don't yet. Maybe we will someday when it fits without squeezing. He helped Caleb fix the chain on a bike that had fallen off, because bikes always fall off when boys ride them like they own gravity. He took a photo of Emma and me under the sugar house lights and sent it to Claire, and Claire posted it, and the strangers on the internet said things like goals and you're lucky to have each other, and for once I did not feel a need to correct anyone. I still have the blue folder that started all this. I keep it in the bottom of the sideboard under the good napkins. Sometimes I take it out and open it and run my finger along the flags that say sign here, and remember how easy it would have been to be tired and to believe fear when it offered to help. I do not judge myself for almost saying yes. I am grateful to the version of me who put down the pen. When my daughter tried to take my farm, I became her landlord, I once said to Helen over coffee with more cream than I usually allow. Helen had laughed and said it sounded like the title of a novel, and I suppose it is. But that isn't my favorite line. My favorite is the one I say to myself when the wind bangs the gate in the night and I am not afraid, because I know what noises houses make when they are not being broken into. It is simple. It is a sentence women my age rarely get to say out loud without being accused of being selfish. It is this: I kept my life. I kept my name. I learned how not to apologize for drawing a fence where there used to be a wide, muddy path. And when spring came again, the fence had flowers along it because that's what things do when they are not asked to hold more than they can carry. The day we planted the last of the fall bulbs before the ground closed to us for a while, Emma asked if I thought the flowers would bloom right there along the fence where the soil is worse and the hose doesn't reach. "They might not," I said. "They might do their own thing in their own time." "That's annoying," she said, and I laughed and agreed that it was, but that it was also beautiful because stubbornness and survival share a mother. She looked at the line we had dug, at the small brown promises we had tucked into a bed of chill, and she asked if I would be here in the spring when they came up. "I plan to be," I said. "I'm under no obligation to leave." We went inside and made grilled cheese and heated tomato soup from a can and ate like kings. When Claire came to pick them up, she sat at the table and pulled the bread heel from the bag because she has always loved the heel, and I have always loved it less. She took a bite and closed her eyes and let herself be a person. "I don't know how to thank you without sounding like I want something," she said, half joking because honesty is easier when it has jokes to ride on. "Thank me by living your life in a way that doesn't require me to save you," I said. She nodded. "I can do that. I know," I said. "That's why I stopped pretending I needed to." After they left and the house exhaled, I stood at the sink and washed the plates I could have put into the dishwasher, but sometimes I need the ritual. The light above the sink made the steam look like a story. I dried my hands and put the plates in their places in cabinets older than my marriage and newer than the woman I used to be. The wind pushed against the kitchen door and then changed its mind and went around the other side of the house, doing whatever winds do when they decide to be kind. I looked out at the fence and thought of flowers whose names I already know and ones whose names I will have to learn. I thought of the cow who will try the fence anyway because curiosity is an animal too, and I thought of the girl I was who would not have recognized this woman, and I forgave her for not knowing yet how possible it is to both love and say no. That night, I fell asleep with the window cracked and the blanket heavy and the sound of the barn settling into the dark. Sometime after midnight, I woke to coyotes singing somewhere close, and instead of fear, I felt something else move through me. It took a minute to name it. When I did, I smiled at myself for being so human. It was not pride exactly, though there was some of that. It was not triumph, though there had been a little of that too. It was relief. Clean, plain relief. Like cool water. The kind that makes you say thank you to no one in particular. The kind that lets you sleep again even when the song outside keeps going, bright and strong and exactly what it is. A week later, when the first snow arrived early and then melted mid-afternoon like a tantrum that burned itself out, a letter came in the mail with no return address and a stamp slightly off-center. Inside was a single page in Mason's tidy block print. It said, "Thank you for the loan. We made our third payment today. Emma says hi. Caleb says tell Grandma the quarter is now in a jar." I put the letter on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a rooster and stood looking at it long enough that the kettle screamed at me to pay attention to something that wanted to boil without ruining itself. I made tea and sat at the table and read the letter again and wondered if it was possible to be more grateful for an envelope than for a bouquet. I decided it was. I am a woman who likes paper. It is almost winter again now. The geese have drawn their V's across my sky twice. Helen and I are arguing about whether to drive to Maine for clam chowder like we used to when our knees behaved. The nurses are booked through March. The barn roof is steady. The sugar house lights still make me cry when I flip them on in the first real dark of December, and the house throws back her shoulders and says, "We are fine." Claire texted me this morning a photo of Emma standing next to a science fair poster about river systems and resilience, a word that will never not make me think of women who keep going because quitting is not any easier. I wrote back, "Tell her I love it. Tell her the house says hello." When I think of titles for what happened, I still like the jokey one Helen named. It is funny in the way a scar can be funny when you tell the story of how you got it at a party, and everybody laughs because everybody knows exactly what a table can do to a shin at midnight. But there is another title I keep for myself, quiet and unshowy. It is this: the winter I remembered how to be the person the girl in me had always hoped I would be. And like all good titles, it is a promise to keep seeing what comes next.